we can start with the blessing and then we can talk about the tabernacle
Blessing.
sanctuary. Let's read it together. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Noah,
melech haolam,
Asher,
asher kiddushanu b'mitzvah v'tzivanu mazot divrei Torah.
Torah,
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments, commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Amen. Okay, Rabbi, she's all yours.
Good morning, everyone. And welcome to everybody. Welcome to Nan, the chair of our Religious Practices Committee. So she's a very senior macher in our organizational hierarchy. And and welcome to the out-of-towners from the Far East, Shirley.
North
And from the Far West, Bernie, or the Far North, Bernie. And so welcome to everybody. Richard, as usual, he's living in very exotic outback. You can see the sunset is
from the back porch of a friend of mine who used to live in Scottsdale, and in the background you can see here, you can't see it, is Camelback Mountain.
Camelback over there.
Sure thing.
Yeah,
and
so
is that a sunrise or a
over
sunset?
a pond and a golf course.
Ah,
yeah. And now you're just showing off.
So beautiful. About 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I had to take it.
oh, nice. Very nice.
And is that a sunrise or a sunset?
It's a sunset.
Of course, it's a sunset. You're not getting
Southwest.
Okay, so today we're talking about the tabernacle, and we're on page 63, and there is a drawing there of the sanctuary. The sanctuary has the Ark of the Covenant. I never actually watched the Harrison Ford movie where I guess they're searching to recover the Ark of the Covenant. Raiders of the Lost Ark, is it called?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
it
this
still
will be
has
a lot-
it, but
this
not
is-
get killed because they open up the ark and they're blasted to smithereens by God.
Yeah, well,
Closed
I could,
and-
if
and
if
it
Harrison
ends up
Ford,
in a U.S. government warehouse where it'll never be seen again.
That's the funniest part of the whole movie.
I know.
if
It's a
Harrison
good
Ford
movie.
had come to Torah study, he would have known not to open the doors.
Right.
All right, well, so this is in some ways very technical, in other ways very important, because the sanctuary is considered to be the most important place, the most holiest place. It also has symbolism and mysticism. So everything in the universe is therefore, symbolized by elements in the sanctuary. The sanctuary was built in the temple. And how many here are in my course on Jeremiah and Isaiah? Only one.
Richard, yeah.
And I'm holding a pen, but you can't see it because God said you can't hold pens.
Ah,
So Jeremiah this week is going to attack this whole idea of having only one place that you can worship God. So Jeremiah feels this is kind of a conspiracy that the priests Kohanim came up with to give them a monopoly over a lot of policies, and he may have been right. Okay, so that's my opening comments about the sanctuary. Just a couple of quick things, and I'll open it up for pointed, short comments. Steve,
Okay, I mean, if you think about it, they're in the desert, they're creating this tabernacle. I would call it a tent, but tabernacle. And they have to schlep it around, what, for 40, not quite 40 years. But that's a big burden.
mhm. Yes, and therefore,
Therefore, I mean, if it, obviously God wanted a holy place to be in. And so therefore they're following God's orders, God's commandments.
okay, and therefore,
It's a place to worship.
okay.
And
Now, most of the Israelites can't fit inside there, right? It's
Right,
it's a
right.
small area, at least when it's still in the wilderness. Yeah, yes, Richard, and then Marcia. Sorry, Marcia.
Number one, there were what, 600,000 Israelites, Jews now?
There were it was said, but I don't believe this, that there were 600,000 heads of household,
That's a huge amount of people
but it's
that
not.
are nomadic, all in one
It's
place.
just not true.
Well, true not that that's what the Bible says, but the sanctuary to me, if you look at it, for me, you can be a Jew and you don't have to go to a temple. You could be a Christian and you don't have to go to church. The temple to me sort of is enforcing the idea that we have a special place for Judaism, for God. That is what it means to me. That like you look at the other religions that are not monotheistic in that area, they all have temples of some sort for their
Mhm.
gods. So why not we have a place that's special for our God?
Mhm. Marcia, and then
So-
maybe Pam.
I think you have to speak to the portability of the sanctuary. As Steve said, they're schlepping it around for all
There are
these.
even more ways you can, but we'll give you three.
You can't see
0106.
something. I've got some sound coming in. Can
Is
you
that-
guys hear it?
Shirley, is that you?
Well, anyway, they're carrying this thing around and it has to be small, it has to be portable, it has to be breakdownable to be able to be moved to the next site. Because as any of, what did we used to call them, the movers and shakers at our temple? No, that you've got to be able to move things around with some flexibility. If they're picking up and moving every few weeks or whatever it was, they have to be able to take it. You can't build something large, which would have been a more, I don't know, the word isn't democratic, but that's the idea of it, where more people could take part in this services. And I think at that point, they were probably used to only a few people having access to the highly high ritual services and areas. I think it was probably from the Egyptian and the Babylonians and all. They probably all had some sanctum sanctorums or whatever they call them, to be able to pray in at that point.
Pam? Minya? Anyone else? Okay, so on one hand, we're looking at the detail. On the other hand, we're trying to get the meaning. So let's start reading Perek Aleph, the Sanctuary in Jewish Tradition, page 63. Minya, would you be willing to start us off?
I can't. My voice isn't working too well because I'm recovering
yeah.
from COVID.
Hope you're okay.
Because of what?
I'm recovering from COVID.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Yeah, this is my second week.
Ouch.
Oh, okay. Well, I am sorry to hear that. Now I see the purple and pink polka dots on your face.
You mean I have measles instead?
No, it's a symbol of it's a symptom of COVID, apparently.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Okay, so refuah shlema to you, Minya, and may you recover completely.
Thank you.
Who would be willing to read for us today?
I'll read.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. Page 63.
Before the creation of the first mikdash or sanctuary, the Hebrews worshiped God on hilltops, beside streams, or wherever they felt moved to pray. Abraham and Isaac traveled to Mount Moriah. Jacob encountered God in a lonely place on the desert and near the river Jabbok. Moses met God through an ordinary bush and at the top of Mount Sinai. Now, after their liberation from Egypt and the acceptance of the laws given to them at Mount Sinai, the people are commanded to build a sanctuary. The sanctuary is to contain the Ark of the Covenant with its sacred stones on which the 10 Commandments are inscribed. It is to be placed in the Holy of Holies chamber inside the inner tabernacle. The opening of the Holy of Holies chamber is to be covered by a curtain. Outside the curtain is a special altar for incense, a table for the shewbread, and a golden menorah or lampstand. In front of the inner tabernacle is another curtain, outside of which are the laver and an altar for burnt offerings. Clearly, the sanctuary is designed for offering sacrifices and prayers to God.
Okay, let's stop there. So, explain to me what we have.
What's a laver?
Where?
Oh, Laver. I read it, but I see it in the picture, but I don't know what it is.
Where's this? L-A.
Right in
Oh,
front
I
of
see.
the altar there.
To the left of the
Laver.
altar.
My guess is it something to wash with?
I
Oh,
agree.
that could
wash
be.
stand.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, probably.
Can somebody look it up so we can confirm that?
Richard,
Rich is looking. Okay.
Okay.
Well, LAVE has to do with what?
It's a basin used for washing and purifying during religious ceremonies.
Okay. Smarty pants.
Used by priests for ritual cleansing in the tabernacle of the temple.
Okay.
It's a ceremonial light vessel. Oh, by the way, I looked at what cubits also are. 100 cubits is approximately 150 feet.
100 cubits is 150. So this thing is 150 by half that amount.
No, yeah, it's 150 by 75 feet.
25.
yeah.
Good size.
So it's a large basin upon a foot or pedestal in the court of the tabernacle, and then later in the temple, containing water for the ablutions of the priests and for the washings of the sacrifices in the temple service. So they used it both for the priests to wash and also to wash the sacrifices. So I guess they must have running water, and then once the water dripped off, it went away. You wouldn't use the same water.
Sort of like when you come back from the cemetery.
Yeah. But to wash it, you might have to wash a whole cow. So I don't know. I would think it'd have to be big. But
I don't know. They probably didn't put the whole cow in it. It probably had it cut up.
you think?
I think, yeah.
All right. So you see, we know very little about the nature of the whole system of what went on in the temple.
Right.
And so this is a very important area that we know almost nothing about. And part of the reason we know so little about it is it's not something we really investigate because it has no modern implications. Okay, what else did we read about in this paragraph in terms of, so that's a good point. There's a laver, which is a washing area. What else is there?
Curtain.
Curtain, where's the curtain?
The curtain is just before you go into where the golden candlesticks are.
Okay.
So the outer room, it must be for the commoners, and then the inner one for the priests.
apparently.
Is a curtain.
So, but it looks like to me that the outer section where the altar for the burnt offering, that would be where the animal is sacrificed.
Yes.
And then they bring either the blood, I guess they scatter the blood around the area, which we haven't discussed yet, but,
But the Holy of Holies is only accessible to the priest, I'm sure.
yeah.
Question,
Yes,
this tabernacle looks too big to be portable.
The tent, if it's a tent, it would be portable,
Right.
because you can
Okay.
put down the tent walls.
Okay, so this, what you see here in the diagram on page 63, that would be inside a tent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, and then the whole tent would be moved.
but the
Right.
next paragraph, Harvey Fields is going to talk about how most biblical scholars think that this was added later to the description in Exodus. So this wasn't really what was happening in the desert. You know, it was added later retroactively.
Oh, okay.
So it's a more theoretical thing rather than something that probably actually was the way it is. But Marcia's here, so I have to be on my best behavior. Richard.
My question is, when we look the Ark of the Covenant on this picture in 63, that contains the clay tablets. What does it contain?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What was in the ark?
Ark of the Covenant, which is just a small portion of this whole picture, that contains the Ten Commandments, the clay tablets.
Correct. According to tradition, anyway, the Ark of the Covenant contained the two sets of the tablets of the Ten Commandments. The first one, which were broken, which were nevertheless collected and deposited there, and the second set, which were not broken. But over the years, between then and now, they somehow were misplaced. But we've actually found them in the back room of our temple when we were cleaning.
You never
And,
know what you're gonna find back there.
Oh, do we have to give it back?
Nan,
Yeah, they said also there's on the table in the Holy of Holies, they have the golden candlestick, which they call the menorah. Is that the seven?
Six.
Is it single candlesticks or is it the seven that we have like lighting around our bima, which is also called a menorah, where the Hanukkah menorah is really a Hanukkah?
yes. So if you look in the description, it says outside the curtain is a special altar for incense, a
Mhm.
table for the shewbread, and
And
a
the
golden
golden-
menorah or
Right.
lampstand.
Is it like a single candlestick, or is it the one with the seven
Branches.
I believe
branches?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's the one that we see on the walls of our temple, which is
Okay.
6+1. And that is
Okay.
the official menorah in the temple, or in the tabernacle in this case.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm looking up shoe bread here.
You're looking up what?
Shoe bread.
Okay.
I looked it
So-
up already.
Okay, what do
You
you
want to
got?
know? It's cakes or loaves of bread, which were always present on a specially dedicated table as an offering to God. So they have the table is like right there opposite the golden
Right.
candlesticks.
Right.
But when it said that it was always available, did they have somebody who just regularly replaced the bread all day long?
They had a 24-hour-a-day bakery.
Bakery?
Bakery, yeah.
God likes strawberry shortcake in particular, so there'd be a steady diet of strawberry shortcakes. I think the name of the baker is Cake Masters. And as God got more religious in later years, it had to become certified kosher.
Well, my father was a bread baker, so maybe he had something to do with
Ah,
it,
there's your
Ah,
interest in it, okay.
right?
Um,
It's a consecrated bread, it says.
and then if you look right in the middle, to the little bit to the upper left of the golden candlestick, what do you see there in the diagram?
looks like the altar for.
Altar of incense.
Okay, so you've been in some Eastern religious buildings where they have incense burning, like in Japan or in Thailand. And so this is a little like that. We don't, or in Catholic churches even. And we don't do that today, right? We don't light incense. Have you ever been to a synagogue where we have incense burning?
Closest you come is the Havdalah candle, I think, and that has no scent.
Right, that's not even close.
Uh-oh.
So clearly the temple is quite different than what we're used to. If we were back in these time periods and we went to the temple in Jerusalem instead of a synagogue, would they give you a prayer book when you came in?
There were no prayer books.
Okay, there were no prayer books. There were no printing presses, so they couldn't print them, but they didn't have prayer books anyway.
Right.
You might hear the priests reciting some psalms, and there might be some instrumentation, right? You could have the lyre and the harp and so they might have some string instruments playing, but you have this incense and you have this shroobed. You might think that's the hamotzi, so you go over and you'd say, when are they going to do the hamotzi and we can eat? And they say, no, that's just for God. There is no hamotzi here. And similarly, you have the Ark of the Covenant. You said, is that where the Torahs are held? And they would say, no, there's no Torahs in there. What is a Torah? They would say, there's the 10 Commandments in there on the tablets. There's these 2 stone tablets and then another 2. And say, oh, we have that above our ark in Sun City, Arizona. Yes, Richard.
I'm assuming that most of the people, most Israelites were illiterate, and that the priests were probably literate to some extent. That would be my guess. And I don't know about archaeological evidence for that, but didn't they have papyrus at that time, where you could write on leaves of papyrus?
Papyrus, you mean?
Papyrus, yeah. Did they have papyrus leaves that people wrote on, and they found some of them in ancient tombs?
You're saying papyrus they had, but animal skins they didn't have?
No, I don't know about animal skins, but I know papyrus they had back in the times of the Egyptians. So I'm wondering if the Egyptian pharaohs, if maybe they could have had some papyrus. 'Cause isn't it the thought that the whole Torah was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, including all the stuff that we know now about the Torah? That's the theory.
Well, that's one theory.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't go with that. I never went with that theory.
Well, I know, but it's the very religious Jew feels that the Torah was given all at the same time, but it was an oral Torah. It wasn't written
Right.
down to about 600 BCE. During the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BC.
I mean, I go with Pam, and what is shocking me about my course on Jeremiah and Isaiah is how much Jeremiah agrees with me. So, well, and it makes sense, where, a lot of the ancients were there and they had different perspectives, but later there's only really one perspective that has, survived through history. So, so yeah, what you're saying, Richard, may be true. I can't confirm it exactly right this second, but I believe you're correct. And then the final sentence there says clearly the sanctuary is designed for offering, sacrifices, and prayers to God. So you can pray to God, but God doesn't just want you to pray, God wants you to sacrifice. And this is something that we have changed in Judaism. Steve.
Okay, well, my question is this. They carried all the materials, like the cloth and for the curtains and the gold and was it dolphin skins or something like that? And they carried all this and because they felt that those were precious things.
Well, that's how do you want me to respond to that?
Honestly.
Honestly, not
Well, I
fiction.
think this was written, this whole section was written later, and it's more of a theoretical description that the Kohanim wanted to emphasize that as far back as anyone could remember, that the work of the Kohanim was all that mattered. That was what God cared about. And so this is an attempt to exaggerate and aggrandize the work in the temple where the Kohanim were. Bernie and then Marcia.
Put this in perspective. The Exodus took place sometime in the latter stages of the Stone Age. And I have trouble reconciling all of this stuff with Stone Age capabilities.
Stone Age, when was the Stone Age exactly?
Think it was like it ended around 3000 BCE.
So this is after the Stone Age.
Let me look that up again.
There's too much, but there's too much going on that's more advanced at this point than Stone Age, I think.
This is after the Exodus. The Exodus, if it occurred, it's considered likely to have occurred in the 13th century BCE.
Well, this is pretty close to that because the end of the Stone Age was somewhere between 2000 and 6000 BCE.
Well, that's
so we're getting close.
This is 700 years after the Stone Age ended, even according to the most recent dating. So this is after the Stone Age ended,
but not by much.
Well, you don't think these people had cell phones?
Yeah.
No, I don't think they had gold either.
Oh, I think they had gold.
Oh,
They had
my.
the Egypt talks about having gold. Right? When you go to the museums, you see gold jewelry, but that dates back to those days.
Yes, gold is around for a very long time. Richard.
Well, to just change the subject a little bit, acacia, which is native to Australia, but is also around the world. We have a lot of acacia trees here in this area. There's like 1,300 different species, and it's actually the hardest of all the hardwoods, acacia trees. So that would be a very reasonable choice. It's probably very heavy too, to make the covenant of the ark out of acacia. It's durable, long lasting, doesn't break easily. It's a hard wood.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, they would have had some real hard sauce to break it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So so the quality of the workmanship and the elements used in the building of the tabernacle are really superlative, excellent, very, very high quality. Marcia.
So when you read all this and you're telling us that the Kohanim developed this story about this well after it happened, right? They went to a lot of trouble to make this into a very special place. Yeah, I mean, they were working really hard to make us want to feel that this was such a special area when you went into the sanctuary. It just seems like it's unreal somehow. it seems like it's devised to suck you into having this feeling of magic of going into this room, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't seem real. I'm, you know, if it was written at the time of, I wouldn't have the problem of thinking that hundreds of years later, they're telling us what this place looked like, you know?
Well, Marcia, the way they describe this is like a very holy area,
Yes.
which we don't in our present life, we don't consider our synagogue, this great holy special area, not in the same level that they do here.
So do you think that when Orthodox people go to services to their sanctuaries, do you think they consider that super holy? I don't know.
I don't know. Good question, Rabbi. Sorry.
I'm trying to get my Orthodox friend in here to talk to us so you can ask him directly these sorts of questions.
Yeah.
Well, Donna's
He's-
about as close as we're gonna get, so.
But Philip is afraid. He's afraid of being in a Zoom room with all these aggressive Reform Jews.
Yes.
Well, I
you
don't,
know. Donna,
I don't know everything there. I do believe it. I believe it because if I didn't, I wouldn't bother with it. I wouldn't bother to study it. I know that it is in the in Judaism, and everybody should understand something from this. But personally, I can't explain it all, but I believe it is true. There was a lot of, before it was written down, where it was sent by way of mouth. And so there may have been some, that changes in the story that was sent down orally. I can't answer to that, but I happen to believe it, and I can't explain why I do. I just do. I believe that God was the whole Tanakh was inspired by God through people. You say, the rabbi says he and Jeremiah agree. Amazing. So I don't know, but I'm very interested in what all of you are saying. I think it's very, very interesting.
okay. Let's keep reading. Marcia, will you keep reading?
Okay. The sanctuary is to contain the Ark of the Covenant with its sacred stones on which the 10 Commandments are inscribed. It is, fully, wait a second.
Go one more.
I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. Wait, let me just get rid of it. Okay,
Let me say one other thing here.
I'm back. Okay.
I know, I think I forgot what I was going to say.
It'll come back to you.
Go ahead.
All right, the sacred stones on which the 10 Commandments are inscribed. It is to be placed in the Holy of Holies chamber inside the inner tabernacle. The opening of the Holy of Holies chamber is to be covered by a curtain. Outside the curtain is a special altar for incense, a table for the shewbread, and a golden menorah or a lampstand. In front of the inner tabernacle is another curtain, outside of which are the laver and an altar for burnt offerings. Clearly, the sanctuary is designed for offering sacrifices and prayers to God. Some scholars believe that the description of the Mikdash did not belong to the original Torah, but was added to the story of the Exodus by later priests who wanted to justify the existence of the temple and priesthood in Jerusalem. To prove their point, these critics argue that many of the materials mentioned in the Torah's description of the Mikdash were not available to the ancient Israelites in the Sinai desert. Other scholars disagree, maintaining that the Mikdash was one of the earliest of all Jewish institutions, although later authors of the Torah may have exaggerated about how it was built or about the materials used in its construction. H.M. Orlinsky explains, acacia wood, cedar, cypress, or olive was later used in Canaan. Ram skins, lambskins, and cloth of goat's hair and the like are all manifestations of nomadic existence.
All right. So this is Harry Orlinsky. He was a famous professor of Bible at Hebrew Union College in New York for many decades. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the first 7 scrolls were offered for sale in New York. And the condition was that no Israeli could buy them.
Why?
Well, the guy who took them, so that it was discovered by Bedouin shepherds who sold it to this shoemaker who was, since he dealt with leather items, he was considered to be an expert in manuscripts. And then that was sold on to this. He was a leader of the Greek Orthodox Church, and he was anti-Israeli. And he decided to move to America, and he wanted to sell the scrolls so that he could build a church in America and get a job. He should have just held on to them and sold them later for millions and millions. But he put an ad in the Wall Street Journal that these scrolls were available for $250,000, which was nothing. Anyway, so Harry Orlinsky was asked by the Israelis to pretend to be a rich American collector. So Orlinsky went in. His name was he was renamed Mr. Green, and he went in and he met the guy selling them, and he looked at the scrolls, and he authenticated them, unofficially. So he looked at them and he said they look real. So then he bought the scrolls from the archbishop, the Greek Orthodox archbishop, for $250,000, which was given to him by the Israelis. And then he took the scrolls and gave it to the Israelis. And that became the scrolls that are in the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem today. And so anyway, the point being is that Orlinsky was very well known. He had a book that I have that we could use sometime that shows some of the most important sections in the Torah and what their significance was from a historical and archaeological point of view. It's a great book, even though it was written many, many decades ago. So what is Orlinsky saying here? Question. Marcia, Steve, Nan, or Bernie?
He's authenticating that these things could have been used in these materials in the ark, I think. Is that
because a lot of these things were manifestations of what?
Nomadic existence, exactly.
Which means what?
Nomadic existence.
What does that mean?
It means that it were present at the time, and nomads would have used them as these people were being nomads in the desert.
Okay.
Easily transported.
So it's not as ridiculous as it sounds. Orlinsky is saying, even though the Israelites were wandering around, and you'd think, where are they going to get, goat hair, and stuff? Well, apparently nomads did have these kinds of things. So where they got them from, we're not sure, but nomads wandering around the desert came across some of this stuff. The wood types was used later in Canaan. So whether they would have had access to it in the desert is another question. But he's saying it's not as ridiculous as it might sound, which is not to say that it's still 100% likely. Marcia.
I just was laughing to myself because when I was in Israel the first time, we were just driving, and at some point I was reading guidebooks, and you will see an encampment by the Bedouins, blah, blah. And I look over and there's a Bedouin tent, and, very typical Arab tent in the desert. And outside is parked a Cadillac. Just cracked me up. They were living in the desert, but they had their fancy car there with them. you know. So you never know what you're gonna find out there.
Sometimes you don't want to know.
That's true.
Okay, Marcia, would you keep, are there
Um,
any other comments so far, Donna?
Yeah, I just want to go back to, I did remember what I wanted to say. It works. The tunnel that's just outside, just in front of the the wall there, goes off to the left, and supposedly, I say supposedly because I have not even seen a map of this, but when you're walking through the tunnel, you're just extremely close to the Holy of Holies, which
Yeah.
was in the temple. And so it was interesting because you do feel something there. I called it a holiness, and I did feel it. And most people, or I shouldn't say most people, some people did. When I was there, when I was walking through, there was a lady there that was, I mean, she was really distraught in front of this area. So I don't know. It's interesting, and you can believe it or not, and you can say, well, this is just a way to get through the rock wall there, but it is, they say, close to the Holy of Holies. Rabbi, you have been there? Yes or no?
Not really.
You didn't walk through the tunnel? Oh, okay.
I
Curious.
did. I was down there. I remember that.
Did you see it?
Yes, but it was a long
Marsha?
time ago. I'm not really remembering, but I was down in those tunnels, yeah. They
Uh-huh.
always give you access to certain points, and then they have, put a block there. They can only go so far.
Yeah. Anyway, and I have a question with the Hebrew. You're saying shoe bread. Is that the correct pronunciation? I assume it is. Having
Yeah,
a Hebrew lesson.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And you want to know what that is in Hebrew?
Yeah.
I think you have to
They're
go to a
talking-
kosher
I
deli.
thought you
to
were
find out.
pronouncing the
They
Hebrew.
they talk
What?
about 12 loaves of bread on Sabbath put out. It's holy bread, and it's
Yeah.
not leavened, because I did read that.
Yeah. But is the word shoe bread the
Um, it's going to take me a little time to find this. Um,
I'm sorry.
Troublemaker.
hmm. Um, all right.
You can make that a homework assignment for all of us till next
I
week.
know.
All right. I'm sorry, I can't find it.
Okay.
We'll go back to it later.
Yeah. I'll go along with Pam. Pam.
Okay.
You want me to
Um,
continue?
Marcia, do you want to read more?
Sure. While we may never be able to prove when the Mikdash, or the first Jewish sanctuary, came into existence, the Torah does seek to clarify its purpose. Moses is instructed by God to tell the people, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. What do these words really mean? Is it possible God was telling the people that without a sanctuary, a building, a place for the Ark of the Covenant, or altars for sacrifice, they would not sense the presence of God in their lives? Are sanctuaries necessary for worship, for finding God? Does God require a building in order to dwell among human beings? And then there's the box that negates that. Do you want me to read the box or no?
Yeah, let's stop for a second and then we'll read the box. So this is really a big question. Are they saying that God lives in the temple or lives in the sanctuary? Or is this, I mean, what is this? What is the theoretical justification? If God is everywhere, then you can pray everywhere. Then what do you need a sanctuary and a temple for? And why only one temple? Because originally there were several temples in different parts. This is what Jeremiah, one of the things that makes him go apoplectic, is why did the priests restrict everything to one temple? Which is clearly not a good idea. So what is this thing? What is this sanctuary? Why is it so special? Anybody want to try to answer that? Richard or Bernie? You're the two that I think can do this. I guess not, but Si's not here.
I can only look at it from an archaeological standpoint and from an anthropological standpoint when we look at the temples that the ancients had for their gods, that maybe in order for the Jews to sort of feel like they have a god, they needed a temple of some sort to pray to or pray in. Although this is awful small, if there's 600,000 Jews, they'd be pretty crowded getting in that temple.
Well, you know what I think about that number. I already told you. Pam.
But even if it's 1,000, they wouldn't be able to get even closer to that temple. It could only be the priests or maybe the leaders of each tribe, the 12 leaders can get in there.
And I'm a Cohen, so please
the priests.
let me through.
Both sides.
Let me through. I'm a Cohen.
So,
Pam.
Well, to me, what they're saying is the sanctuary is helpful, but not necessarily required.
How do you get that?
Hmm?
Where do you read that through the sources?
Well, where did I see that?
In the box.
The box, yes.
Oh, okay. The box that we're about to read. Okay.
Yes.
So these are medieval and early modern sources. So none of them are biblical and only one is rabbinic. But Pam Marshall's going to read you the 5 sources. But these are not authoritative sources.
Okay. Marcia, you're on.
Yeah, I know. What does it mean and where I'm going to be reading Mechilta to Exodus 17:6?
Yeah, Mechilta is a rabbinic commentary to the Bible. So Mechilta is the oldest one on this list and the closest to having something that comes from the classical rabbinic tradition.
Okay.
The others, Yehuda Halevi is a medieval thinker in Spain. Asadia Gaon is a Babylonian Jewish thinker, medieval. The Kobrin rabbi is a Hasidic rabbi. And Martin Buber is a modern scholar.
Yeah.
So what they say is all interesting, but it's not authoritative. Mechilta is older and represents the classical rabbinic tradition. Why they don't put him the Mechilta first, I don't know.
Maybe it doesn't matter. Okay. Where does God dwell? Oh God, where shall I find you? All hidden and exalted is your place. And where shall I not find you? Full of glory is the infinite space. Yehuda.
All right, what is Yehuda Levi saying there?
Where shall I not find you? In other words, you are everywhere.
So Yehuda Levi is saying God is everywhere, not just in the temple. Okay.
There is no place without God, is Saadia ben Joseph Hagagon. Wherever you find a human footprint, there God is before you. Mechilta. The Kobriner rabbi turned to his Hasidim and said, "Do you know where God is?" Then he took a piece of bread and showed it to them and continued, "God is in this piece of bread. Without God's nurturing power in all nature, this piece of bread would have no existence." Where is the dwelling of God? This was the question with which Rabbi Mendel of Kotsk surprised a number of learned people who happened to be visiting him. They laughed at him. What a thing to ask! Is not the whole world full of God's glory? Then he answered his own question. God dwells wherever we let God in. It's from
All right. So all of these are very reform minded in that God is everywhere. God doesn't live in the temple. God lives everywhere. God is wherever we let God in.
I
So
like
this
that.
is nice, right?
Thank you, Moses Maimonides. And isn't that what he said too?
Well, Maimonides would see God more as an abstraction.
Yeah.
So he might not see that God is anywhere. God is simply, well, I don't want to put words into Maimonides' mouth.
Spinoza, certainly. Spinoza was a pantheist.
Right. So, but I think Maimonides is more, it's a philosophy. It's philosophy is very real to him, but God is, I don't know if Maimonides would exactly say God is everywhere. But anyway, the problem with all these thinkers, if God is everywhere, then what do we need the sanctuary for? What do we need the temple for? Does God live in the temple? Clearly not. God is everywhere. So if God doesn't live in the temple, why do you need this expensive building when God is just as comfortable on the grass and in the trees and in the yard and in people's shacks? You could save a lot of money without building him this fancy building. So this is a problem, right? I mean, you don't have to answer it, but it's a problem.
Yeah,
Okay, any comments, Donna?
when you say God lives everywhere, yes, means he lives in the temple as well. And
Right.
sometimes people feel more comfortable going into some place that has been designated as a place to communicate with God. I mean, yeah, you can sit under the tree and that, but some people feel, and it's also a place to bring those that do believe in God and praying for God and doing it as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Interesting, but God may live in the temple because God lives everywhere, but God would be just as happy living on the mountain without a building there.
Oh, absolutely.
So he's only in the temple because you built the temple and God is everywhere. So you don't need the temple.
No, but it's also as I said, the place to bring people together to do this together.
Ah, okay. So it's more for people than it is for God. Minya.
Doesn't there also need to be a place where the Torah is stored?
Ooh,
Well, they
good
didn't
point.
have a Torah yet.
Right,
But they had the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ten Commandments, right?
And
And the Moses originally wanted to store the two tablets in a bank vault. But the bank, I think it was Wells Fargo actually, said no, bank vaults are for jewelry and for documents, and the bank vaults are small. The banker told Moses, so Moses said, well, this is a document, and he has these two big stone things. He said, yeah, but we're talking about documents on paper.
Couldn't fit in that little box.
Yeah.
So we don't have a vault big enough. So that's when Moses said we need to build a temple to store them. But seriously speaking, I mean, you could find somewhere else to store these tablets, couldn't you? Bernie?
Is it possible that God at this point is a relatively new concept? And in order to sell it to the people, you have to show them something concrete. Not concrete in the sense of cement, but something physical.
Of course. Good answer. And that's true today as well, right? I mean, having a synagogue helps us to sell God in a Jewish context, right? When people go by and they drive by and they see a synagogue, that reminds them that there's a God that the Jews worship. And there was an article in Atlantic Magazine this week by Shira Telushkin. You should all read it. Her father is Rabbi Joseph Telushin, who writes all these books. And she's a journalist for the Atlantic, and she teaches journalism. And so she's writing the article is called "The New American Judaism," and she says, "Well, there's a terrible shortage of rabbis." She goes on and on about that, and and synagogues are closing, and institutional Judaism is fading and withering and maybe dying. But she says that there's a lot of independent things going on that are replacing it. And so I think the subtitle was "Institutional Judaism Shrivels," but personalized or individualized Judaism is thriving. So I'd like you all to read that article and tell me if
I wrote
what
it
she
down.
said makes any sense.
Can we just Google it and pull it up? I have the
Yeah,
Atlantic. I think I might.
Google it under Shira Telushkin, "The New American
Oh,
Judaism."
come on, spell that. The last name
Telushkin,
anyhow.
P-E-L.
What is it?
U-S-H-I-N.
Yeah.
Oh, S-H-K-I-N. Telushkin.
Yeah.
But if you email me, I'll send you the link directly. But otherwise, you can just. But it's an interesting article, and she says basically that she doesn't really go into this point, but she says American Jews don't really want buildings. But I don't really agree with anything she says.
Yeah.
Nan, did you want to make a comment there?
No, I'm gonna email you to get the link. I just went like this. Okay, I'm gonna get the link.
Well, he's gonna send it, he said, to all of us, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have everybody's.
Send it to me and I'll
Send it to
forward
Steve.
it to
Yeah, he's got
everybody.
it.
Okay.
But as Jews, we like to
Thank
gather.
you, Steve.
We like to gather. I mean,
Right.
It's
And
very-
not just Jews, I guess every group, right? Like I'm in the cycling club a little bit, although I'm like retired. And they have gatherings every once in a while. They have a annual meeting and then they have a little party, and so they're groups like to gather. People like to gather. People are instinctually social. And if you have something in common with a group, you want to gather with that group. And then you decide how much you have in common with that group. So I agree with Pam. So therefore, if we like to gather, that's why we needed a temple.
Yes, I think that's why, because we didn't want to, we had to gather in a place. So we needed a place.
And it's not about God so much, it's about people.
Yeah.
It's about an identity, if you will, when you have a group with a common interest gathering, and in this case, it was their religion. It could be anything. In this case, it was their religion. Don't you think? I mean,
Okay. Marcia, would you keep reading? We're at
Sure.
post box, page 64.
Below the box.
Right-hand side.
Jewish tradition teaches that we experience God in many ways. God is to be found in the beauty and mystery of nature, in the love and friendship we share with others, in the spiritual impact of a ritual or celebration, and in the work done to promote justice, generosity, and peace.
All right,
There is
stop
no-
for a second.
Yes.
This is a very reform idea, right? This is a reform rabbi writing this. Do you agree with this? That God is to be found in many places. We experience God in many ways. We find God in nature. We find God in friendship. We find God in work to promote justice. Do you agree with this? Partially, not at all, or entirely? Donna?
I just for interest's sake, I have a thing on my phone that tells me when Israel is being bombed, and they were just being bombed in an area.
Oh boy. Do you agree that God is everywhere, that God is in friendship, God is in nature, God is in peace, God is in generosity? Do you agree with that? Anyone else?
I don't think, that's interesting, difficult to say, but I don't think there's a line where, okay, God is here and there's a line there, but he's not there. So if he's everywhere, he's got to be everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, someone else, Pam?
I think what Donna says is right. Where do you draw the line on where God's presence is going to be felt? That's not a place. This is where they're talking about in the promoting of these things. So that's, if you feel you're doing God's work, I suppose that's the same thing.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now, Marcia, you can keep going.
There is no, where was I?
There's no
There is no
exclusive place.
exclusive place for God. There are many places where God dwells. King Solomon, who built the first temple in Jerusalem, admitted that God, who could not be contained by all the heavens, could certainly not be limited to this house that I have built. If that is so, no mikdash or sanctuary can be the exclusive place of God, then what can the Torah mean when it reports that God said to Moses, "Make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them"? What is the purpose or the function of the sanctuary in Jewish tradition? The early rabbis offer an answer, though through an imaginary conversation between God and the people of Israel. They picture the people explaining to God that all human rulers have beautiful palaces, rooms where offerings are brought to them and where the people can demonstrate their loyalty and love. The people say to God, "Shouldn't you, our ruler, have such a palace?" And according to the rabbis, God responds, "My children, I have no need for such a place. After all, I do not eat or drink. Obviously, however, you have a need for such a place. It will help you experience me. For that reason, build a sanctuary and I will dwell in your midst." That's what Pam said. What the early rabbis sensed was our human need for a place of worship, a special space set aside for meditation and prayer. It is the nature of human beings to uplift the importance of ordinary buildings by assigning them unique functions and names. Out of bricks and mortar, steel and poured concrete, we create and decorate structures we call capitals, museums, concert halls, theaters, and courts. Sometimes we add to their importance by linking them to the names of popular personalities or donors. Like capitals, museums, or concert halls, religious sanctuaries serve a significant function. They are the unique spaces we set aside for our meetings with God through prayer, study, and sharing with others. Does that mean that they are not only places where God dwells? Of course not. Just as we enjoy music and art in a variety of places outside of concert halls and museums, we can pray and encounter God in many different places as well.
Okay. So, but Abraham Joshua Heschel, you may be familiar with this. He said that Judaism is more interested in sanctifying time rather than space. So he called the Sabbath a cathedral in time. And so you think that Judaism discourages sanctification of buildings, that buildings are not important? I mean, Harvey Fields makes a good argument here why, different groups build these massive buildings, that we have these museums, that are here. The Guggenheim Museum in New York, the building is so bizarre, just circles going up and up and up. Or the, a lot of cities have some building that is, the city's known by Empire State Building in New York, and Toronto has some big building, right? And Paris has, of course, the Eiffel Tower. So is this something that Judaism doesn't participate in, this idea to take a building and make it important? Comments? Yes, Steve.
Well, I mean, I know a number of congregations who purchased buildings and then consecrate it into a holy place. So it could be anything.
Mhm. So then it doesn't have to be anything special.
Well, I mean, after they buy it, then they create it to make it special.
But it doesn't have to be the biggest and the fanciest,
it
most
doesn't.
luxurious, and the most. So, and of course, Catholicism put a lot of emphasis on this, right? Like, in every European city, there's tremendous cathedrals. That they spend sometimes hundreds of years building these things. There are buildings that are so ornate and elaborate that nothing could even come close to competing with them. And of course, they passed laws that the synagogue had to always be lower physically than the church.
Well, that's just showing off. That's just Christians showing off. Bigger, better.
Well, they took that very seriously.
Yeah.
Yes, Nan.
Well, I think it's changing. I remember, especially growing up in New York, a lot of the synagogues were very large to accommodate the immigrants that came, and we're now living in the United States, but we're seeing changes now. Even in our own synagogue, that we're trying to rent out part of it because the building is so big, and we're not taking full advantage of all the space that we have. And as they said, with the changing, like the article you referred to, where some people are saying that Judaism itself is changing, there's less affiliation with synagogues, that congregations are getting smaller. The building or the meeting place that they're going to be in is going to have to evolve and change in some of those areas. So I think we may see that there are going to be less formal synagogues. I mean, we're seeing that in Phoenix with, Temple High having sold their building, and they will be going to another different type of formation.
Well, their new building's going to presumably be fancier than their old building.
But the synagogues in general, I think may be changing. New congregations. I mean, we've seen congregations start in people's homes, and when they get too large to meet in someone's home, then they have to look for a place they can rent or build. And I think we will see the face of synagogues changing nationally.
Into what?
I don't know, it may just be a large room that they rent out or a series of rooms, you know, and not an entire building. Because of the overhead expenses. And, you know, I just think it may evolve that way. I don't know for sure, but I mean, that's just my opinion.
And the way that it is now, I think you can
Well-
see we're trying to model it as much as
Well-
possible. We're trying to model it as much as possible on the temple and the sanctuary,
Mhm.
you know, our synagogue. Marcia.
I think what Dan has said has been going on for years. I lived in California starting in 1990, and there was the conservative congregation in the area was in an office building. It's been, and so and they were, and other places around similar. I mean, I've seen in Massachusetts before that, we were in a little Cape Cod house until we built a larger bunk because we grew. And so it doesn't matter where, you know, or how big. I think it matters on being able to accommodate the congregation and the congregation's investment in it as a sanctuary, as a place of worship. That's what counts. It isn't necessary the where, you know, so much. And I think people just want to show off, as we know, we were just talking about, and Pam mentioned, the churches in, especially in Europe, are like gilt and gold and beyond, you know. They're dazzling when you walk in because they want to show off, and the richest people and the richest kings could build the biggest cathedrals, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that happened in Judaism too. It doesn't mean it's necessary. It's just a human nature thing to want to show off that you have the biggest and the best kind of thing. So I think that's what that is.
Well, when I was in Mazatlan, Mexico, the cathedral there has these Jewish stars on this one row.
Yeah.
And apparently the story was that when they were raising money to build the cathedral, a local Jewish guy gave a very, very extensive contribution. So in appreciation, they stuck the Jewish stars into the design. So
there were Jewish stores in the what is the Mormon temples in their design in their buildings. So go figure.
okay. Marcia, you want to read a little bit more?
Okay. We create religious sanctuaries, however, out of our need for beautiful and inspiring environments where we can find moments for reflection, comfort, and hope in difficult times, direction and wisdom when we face moral choices, and beautiful rituals with which to celebrate the most important moments of our lives. Our sanctuaries provide us with spaces where we can share with others and sense the support and enthusiasm of a community. As the early rabbis taught, our sanctuaries answer our human and spiritual needs.
All right, is that true? So we want a space where we can reflect and find hope. We want a space where we can go in difficult times. We want a space where we can somehow acquire wisdom when we face difficult decisions. Does a synagogue, a sanctuary like we have at our temple, does that serve those purposes? Or do people just show up and suffer through a short service so that they can eat at the oneg and socialize? I mean, do we actually achieve what we're supposed to be achieving? Pam?
I think we do both. I think people come to achieve that, but also there's also areas where you get a benefit. No.
But that we do use the sanctuary
Yes,
to find hope in difficult times and wisdom when we face a moral quandary
Yeah.
and so forth.
right. I think we do that, but then at the end of the service, we have an opportunity to be with
Right.
other Jews. And, you know, so we get both.
Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with a few brownies after a lot of hard moral quandaries. Yes, Marcia.
Chocolate never hurts. I remember when my father was dying and he was in a Catholic hospital in New York, St. Elizabeth's. And my mother told me afterwards that she had gone into the chapel in the little church next to the hospital. And she said it didn't matter that it was a Catholic church. It was a place to pray and to, just, to sit with her thoughts and find solace. And I think that matters a lot to people. So, that's a consideration in there. You want a
Well,
private place.
Well, my mother's family is from Waterbury, Connecticut, and it was heavily Irish and Italian. And every election, it was the Democratic primary that counted, and the Irish ran one candidate and the Italians ran another.
Yes.
And sometimes the Italians won, sometimes the Irish won. But of course, both groups were Catholic. Jews in general were much closer with the Italians than with the Irish. But that, was general. There was Irish that were very close as well. But anyway, so when my grandparents were in the hospital, they went to I think there was a couple of Catholic hospitals. So there's a cross in each room up there. So the first couple of times we just kind of looked at the cross and it made us a little bit uncomfortable. And then I think my uncle said one time, we were just chatting with one of the nurses about it. He says, "Oh, it comes down." And the nurse just showed you just pick it up and it comes, there's a nail and the whole cross comes down. So after that, anytime a relative was in the hospital, you just pulled the cross down and there's a drawer and you just stuck it in there and you didn't have the cross up there anymore. But that was an easy way to make the room a little bit more neutral religiously. Okay, other comments?
We rented the Catholic church for high holidays in that town in Massachusetts, and we were uncomfortable upstairs. So they actually had a big meeting room down in the basement, and we were happier down there. So it didn't have all the accoutrements of the, the altar, etc. That was upstairs, and we had our big room to have our high holiday services in.
Okay, I want to read a little bit more. Someone asked Marcia to read commentator Umberto Cassuto, who was an modern Italian Jewish thinker.
Commentator Umberto Cassuto sees another purpose in the creation of the sanctuary. He points out that the people of Israel experienced God in a powerful way at Mount Sinai. They heard the Ten Commandments and felt themselves connected to God in a unique covenant. But once they set out on their journey away from Mount Sinai, says Cassuto, it seemed to them as though the link had been broken unless there was in their midst a tangible symbol of God's presence among them. In other words,
Stop. So Cassuto is saying what? Bernie?
He's saying what I said before, that they need somewhere to feel associated with God, because it's a relatively new concept to them.
Okay.
And you feel that this is the core of why it resonates for Jews. Okay. Responses to Bernie's idea. Do you agree with that? Richard, Donna?
No.
Okay.
I think so, and that's what the temple is. It's sort of a station between our secular lives and our religious lives. But I remember if we ever go on that trip to Spain and Portugal, there's a little town called Ubeda. I may have mentioned it in southern Andalusia, in which there's a very huge temple. I mean, not temple, very huge church. And why is a church in a little poor area? Because it was built by a minister of Ferdinand and Isabel and he could do it because he was a minister. So it was to the glory of God, but also for his own power and prestige. And at the same place, because Jews were weak in this time of Spain, there is a temple which they found from dating back at least to 1492, probably a few hundred years before that, which is sort of set down in the ground low, indicating that we as Jews could also celebrate our existence and our relationship with God, but we don't need anything big and fancy. In fact, we couldn't even have it big and fancy if we wanted to at that time.
Mm-hmm. Marcia?
Isabel was the crazy one, though. She's
Well,
the
she
one who
wasn't
well,
crazy. She
well,
was
she
just
was
a
religious crazy.
fanatical Catholic.
Yeah, and she was building like crazy. The town that Maimonides lived in, I can't remember, was it right now? Cordova?
Cordova.
Where is it?
Cordova.
Cordova. Yeah, I was there, and that's where that church, that cathedral was so immense. And there had down the street there was a place where they had built there was a Jewish sanctuary there, a temple there, or whatever they called it, a synagogue. And then over that was built the Muslim house of prayer. And then the whole thing is now leveled and it's a little park area because that cathedral had to be the biggest deal in town. And I think that where Maimonides' house was, there was a little synagogue right in his home, if I remember. I don't remember quite.
Mhm.
Yeah, but Isabel was quite the, she was building and building and building churches all over the place. Yeah. To the glory of, the Christian church, the Catholic Church.
There is in Barcelona a synagogue in the old town that's probably the size of my living room.
Right.
And I believe it's pre-Columbian.
Wow.
Would almost have to be because after Columbus was the Inquisition.
Right, 1490. 1492 was the Inquisition when all the Jews were expelled from Spain.
Right.
Unless they converted to Christianity.
But the massive amounts of conversion started in 1391 with the rioting. There was a lot of rioting in the year 1391, and many Jews were forced to either convert or be killed. And so this is 100 years before the expulsion.
Or pretend to convert.
Well, they had to allow themselves to be baptized.
Yeah.
And once you were baptized, at least in this context, you couldn't undo it. Some of the popes in the Crusades, there was at least one pope that ruled that if a Jew was forcibly baptized, that was it did not count. But in Spain, the ruling was that it did count. Anyway, to conclude, let's look in the box quickly. The second comment there is from Rabbi Jacob Weinstein. If you see it on the right side of page 65, our sages believe that the building of holy palaces, the exercise of piety, prepares the heart for godliness. People who build sanctuaries are more likely to feel the spirit of holiness, the mood of sanctity. And so this is the argument for building a sanctuary, that it's a way to actually encourage people whom, are easily distracted or not that interested. But if you paid $10,000 or $20,000 toward a big building fund, you're going to go. The husband will say to the wife, "Get ready for services." And the wife says, "I don't want to go." And the husband will say, "We gave so much money to that place, we better go." So it does maybe encourage this sort of thing. And then finally, Chaim Nachman Bialik, who was a Hebrew poet, in English, if you would know the mystic source from where your persecuted people facing slaughter drew in evil days the strength and fortitude to meet grim death with joy and bare the neck to every sharpened blade and lifted axe, If you would know the bosom where streamed your people's tears, its heart and soul and gall, if you would know the fortress where your ancestors carried to a safe haven their Torah scrolls, the sacred treasure of their yearning souls, if you would know the shelter which preserved immaculate your people's spirit, then go to the house of prayer.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Well, we could talk about this a lot more. I mean, we really need to understand the architecture and the contents of the sanctuary in much greater depth. But Steve is not giving us any more time. He says 90 minutes is the maximum, and we're at 87 minutes or
We got
85
5 minutes
minutes.
to go.
Be close, yes.
5 minutes to go.
Um, so we are pretty much at the end.
So we ready for the blessing?
Any
Uh,
final thoughts?
Any final comments before we conclude? No? Okay.
Okay, over to you,
Well,
Steve.
don't you,
Yes, Bernie.
Bernie?
I wonder if this is where the movie got the comment, if you build it, he will come.
Uh-huh. Well, it's definitely in the spirit of that, correct?
Yeah.
That was from a movie, what was it, with Kevin Costner, Field
Yeah,
of Dreams?
Field of Dreams.
I
Yes.
never saw the movie, but I was in Wisconsin. The senior rabbi mentioned that in one of his sermons.
If you provide an oneg, they will come.
Yes. Oh.
Okay, Steve, we're back to you for the final
All right.
blessing.
Let us conclude then with this blessing together. Baruch
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan Torah emet v'chayei olam nata tofeinu. Baruch atah Adonai
Notain
Torah.
Blessed is Adonai,
Adonai our
God,
God,
ruler of the universe, who has given us the teaching of truth, implanting
planting within us
eternal life.
eternal life.
Eternal life.
Blessed is Adonai,
Adonai.
giver of the Torah. Amen. All right, Rabbi, you have any announcements that you need to come up?
Bernie has something.
Go ahead, Bernie. No?
No.
Okay.
I
Steve
was
and
just waving
sat
goodbye.
down yesterday, and we went through. We picked topics for the rest of the year, all the way until Rosh Hashanah. So we have plenty of topics, and we're going to print that out and distribute it. And anyone who wants to prepare anything in advance, when I'm gone at various points, if you'd like to lead a group, then let Steve know. And if we're going to also try to provide some supplementary readings. So if there's something, you'll be able to see the topics for many months ahead. If you have any suggested readings, let us know, and we'll try to send it out with the Harvey Fields.
Got it. Okay.
Don't
Okay,
forget
then.
the Atlantic link.
Thank you, Rabbi. Everyone, enjoy the rest of the week. And we'll see you guys soon.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.